Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I would ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
WESN.
Well, time moves on and the commentary continues. We're still, to some extent, unpacking what happened in the US, where while it didn't necessarily get framed this way on their election night, but it turns out that it was as complete a victory as one could get in an election, in a modern democracy. And I've heard the words romp and annihilation used to describe how badly Kamala Harris lost. But I still go back to the fact that it wasn't who won or lost that was interesting to me, because obviously there are two candidates. Any prediction on who will win will be 50% right, or have a 50% chance of being right. But how the election would turn out, I think a lot of pundits are surprised. And again, I think there are a lot of lessons with regards to that we could learn from, that a lot of democracies could learn from, because quite frankly, it may have showed some of the baselines of human nature with regards to how they react, how we as human beings react to certain things. Trump has all of these criminal charges and cases against him, and it seems as though after winning the popular vote, that 70-something million Americans said, listen, I don't have time for that. I have to worry about the cost of food. But also there's the fact that, and I'll come back to it again, that it seemed as though, at least in some states, party loyalty did not matter nearly as much as it used to. And in fact, I've seen comments on various videos saying, first-time voting Republican, Democrat, first-time voting Republican, moderate, first-time voting Republican. And also I've seen Democrat pushed out of my party. And then it, ironically, comes back to the fact that as much as the Democrats wanted this campaign to be about not voting in Trump, it seems as though the majority of the voting population in America decided to vote out the Biden administration. Which leads me to locally, and we'll get more discussion on the American election and the implications. But locally, I think there are a lot of parallels with regards to how our politicians craft their political strategy. And right now we're seeing two political parties, which one could argue that in the States, both the Democratic Party and the Republicans, they had a bit of turmoil. I don't think the establishment wanted Donald Trump, and Kamala Harris was a last-minute candidate. Meanwhile, here locally, the PNM and the UNC, they have their own internal issues, which have been made public. We don't know about anything extra that might still be behind the scenes that successfully has been kept behind the curtain. But one of the people that has brought out some of the issues to the public forefront, Robert LaHunt, I do wonder now if he is either having buyer's remorse, or that's a very indirect analogy, to be more direct, is maybe regretting a little bit making his complaints public, because now it's obviously, this is something that should always be considered by politicians. Everything you say can and will be used against you by the court of public opinion, as well as, and especially by, any potential political opponent. So the opposition leader has weighed in on the situation with Stuart Young and brought up the question of race. And Mr. LaHunt is saying, don't do that because it's not about race. Now, on one hand, I'll agree with him. I think leave it to the media, leave it to the population to bring that up. In a situation where both political parties are viewed as potentially using race as a way to divide the voting population, race as a tool in order to market themselves and to get more voters, even though they don't actually outright say it, it's probably best for both political parties to stay away from directly referencing that racial situation because they both have a hand in it. But the point is, Mr. LaHunt now had to deal with the opposition leader taking advantage of his statements to be used as ammunition to go after her political opponents. And I don't necessarily think he did a good job defending himself, because he had to essentially try to defend the party while criticizing the party. And it just doesn't come across as effective. I don't necessarily think he contradicted himself. I just don't think it's very effective. I feel very uneasy about it. It's making me wonder exactly what's going through his head. What's his clear directive here? Is it for the benefit of the party? Is it not? With regards to the current administration, the things that he's saying that he disagrees with, how far is he willing to go? Some people who are in the middle, and as well as those who are biased against the PNM, might just look at this and say he's whiffle-waffling, he's non-committal. Is he really serious about what's going on? Granted, I don't know if he should have outright said it. Yes, his race is a problem. That might be a bridge too far as well. So I do think he's in a tricky situation, at least because I believe there isn't really a good way for him to push back against Kamala without potentially being seen, I'm not saying he actually is, but being perceived as undermining his own criticisms of the PNM's internal processes now. And if he didn't push back against Kamala, then he could be seen as a traitor. Not just someone who's airing the party's dirty laundry, but someone who is indirectly assisting a political opponent. So it is what it is. I don't envy his position. I do wish, though, that, look, decide what principle you want to stand on right now. Party loyalty, or do you determine that there really needs to be some sort of change or accountability and or transparency within the PNM right now? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't defend the party against a political opponent, but try and make it clearer exactly what your priorities are. You may think that you have done so, but more often than not, many a politician thinks they had good messaging and then are confused. What is it you all don't understand? And the problem is, at some point, it's not up to the public to interpret your words how you want them to be interpreted. Because there's 1.499999999 million of us, and one of you, And if you leave it up to the to the entire population to try to reach where you want them to reach with regards to understanding your words without doing everything you can to help them, well, we already know you can't please everybody. So don't expect everybody to interpret things how you want them to be interpreted, unless you give us the help files, unless you pave the way in the direction that you want us to go, unless you draw the margins, the lines for us to stay within. You put the blinders on, for better or worse, with regards to that analogy. At the very least, outline, try and be specific. The problem with being specific is then that means you commit to something. And if you commit to something, that's a very good way, if you're wrong, to get egg on your face. And a lot of politicians don't like to be wrong. Therefore, listen to them talk. They don't commit to anything. Therefore, we get where we get. Now, one other thing to point out just before we start the show, business community is looking with bated breath, maybe a little bit, on the Minister of Finance's efforts to change the foreign exchange distribution process and systems. Meanwhile, one local conglomerate, Ansa McCall, has just secured what they describe as the largest acquisition in its 143-year history. And one of the reasons why is strengthen the group's financial resilience and sustainability by providing enhanced foreign currency inflows. This is what we're seeing all of the big conglomerates and holding companies of and investments of TNT. The big moves are outside because to some extent they have to. The prospects of growth of our economy is maybe more limited than we think. And the issue with foreign exchange is maybe even more limiting than we think. And then we have to determine, are we going to take an issue with our businessmen investing outside? This was done with a loan arrangement. It wasn't necessarily done with cash, foreign currency, hard currency, or otherwise from within the country going out, according to the reports. But the point is, investments by our businesses are overseas, not here. What does that mean for our future? Yes, we're seeing new hotels being invested in, but what about new industries? What about diversification? I would argue the new hotels, like the airport, without a supporting industry around it, all of these moves puzzle me every time, because let's not forget, somebody bought Carlton Savannah, renovated it into bricks. Now, I haven't necessarily been proven right in my assumption, but Carlton Savannah sold for a reason. Magdalena, they want to sell it for a reason. And Hilton, Trinidad Hilton, every time they need a renovation, is the $400 million straight out to the taxpayers' pockets? That's what it seems like, right? That was part of the budget. And now we have two more Hiltons. One by the airport, one in South. To what extent does Piarco need more hotel room capacity? And to what extent does South need it? Maybe they do. I have no idea. That's not the part of tourism that I deal with on a semi-regular to regular basis. But where else are we seeing any significant investment? That in itself does not build an industry to just have more rooms, where we have no indicators that the industry itself is improving in terms of quality of products, marketing, infrastructure. There's some issues in regards to certain legislations and government services and public utilities for the tourism industry that makes things overly difficult? Where's the ease of doing business? And that's just one industry. And they're all reliant on foreign exchange. And perhaps, I don't know if it's too late to push tourism, but because tourism obviously can't earn us foreign exchange. But I feel as though the moves, we're moving with incomplete moves. And it might be too late to course correct when the foreign X crunch gets even worse. Now, with that said, let's take a quick break. When we come back, actually, no, let's not do that. Let's now hit a few stories with today's daily review. All right, the first story I wanted to get into from since Monday, but I always pushed it back. Don't want to push it back anymore. It was the statements by one criminologist with regards to extortion. And he had a very specific claim with regards to businesses using drug money to fund their operations. And then one of the reasons why he goes to that is, look at the kidnapping situation, particularly the one where the gentleman was kidnapped, the money, the ransom was paid, and then he was found dead anyway. And he was saying, look, if you take drug money to build up your business and the criminal side of the operation collapses, wouldn't the criminals now be looking for the money? And to some extent now, to what degree is Dr. Darius Figueroa referring to front organizations? And to what degree is he referring to businesses who they need loans and they're willing to take a risk going to the criminal element as opposed to a local bank? There could be many reasons for that. Maybe the banks don't trust them, think they're a bad customer with regards to loans. Credit history might be bad. Might not even be their fault the credit history is bad. I don't know. But I think the issues are that unless we have hard data to tell us that this is true, we can't assume that this is true. We could maybe say in one case this may have happened, or we may have evidence to say in one case this did happen. We could suspect if we don't have any evidence, and then we have to say we don't have any evidence, but this is a possibility. But to essentially utilize generalized statements that have an absolute tone, meaning to say this is what is happening. The surge of extortions is because businesses are using drug money. It could be true, but I don't know. I don't think it's responsible to say it without enough evidence. You have to at least be able to link multiple businesses together doing this. Even if you have evidence of an anecdotal single example, that's not enough. Do I think it's possible? Yes. The economy is a funny place right now. And more importantly, I think the confidence in the economy is in a funny place right now. And then the perception of law and order in the country is in a funny place right now. So I don't think that this is impossible or even improbable. In some cases, it could be because, look, the gentlemen who were kidnapped were fairly young. Now, I'm not saying that they were involved with this, but let's just assume you could easily see where young people wanting to have their own business, and it takes a lot of money to start up a business, to kickstart a business, to finance a new business. Maybe they can't get it all from the banks, and they're confident in their ideas, so they think, I need to find somebody who would be willing to lend me that money. Maybe it's loan sharks. The problem is, what if the businesses fail, or the business isn't just making as much money as you would have hoped? And don't expect criminals to necessarily care about things like that. If the banks could be impatient, well, then some criminals will probably be more impatient. They have no reason. They have nothing to compel them to be reasonable. Now the question is, I do wonder exactly why did Dr. Figueroa say this? There has to be a reason, right? He could technically be wrong in the sense of he should not paint central businessmen with a broad brush, because I believe that's generally what he was referring to, or businessmen in general. He might be wrong with that. Don't paint them with a broad brush, because it's not helpful if a significant amount of businessmen, if not the majority, if not a super majority, so to speak, are not involved in this, and it's one or two, a minority. Well, that doesn't help, because the solution would not be to treat it as though the majority are involved. But he might be right in the sense of he has seen something practical. He has heard something practical. He has found evidence to suggest that there is a very real problem that he is referring to. And I would like to know exactly what that is. Are there businesses connected to the criminal empire? Because one of the assumptions people will have, and this might be one of those things that everybody knows, but no one necessarily wants to have to deal with or face or bring out in the open officially to try to speak about and have a national discussion. To what extent is the drug money? What extent is it making up the economy? What is the fraction of the economy that really is illegal proceeds of crime? We all know who is rumored to be the drug lords of the country, who may or may have businesses that's rumored to be fronts for crime. If it is that illegal proceeds of crime is making up too much of our economy, there could be some bitter medicine to swallow if you want to deal with crime to that extent. And I'm not saying that's a reason to not deal with it. I am saying then there will be some short-term consequences that we have to face. Ripping that out of a society is not quite that simple, but I hesitate to say that I believe this to be 100% true, because the implications for society is how much of our economy is based on crime and the underworld. We already suspect, some of us within the commentary space of TNT, that with regards to foreign exchange in the country, a significant fraction of it, if not could be a majority, is done through the black market. Meaning that the government's attempt to keep the foreign exchange rate fixed really doesn't matter, because too many businesses utilize the black market to get foreign exchange, and demand and supply forces are more or less acting there with no intervention whatsoever. So we already suspect that. But now, with regard to the GDP, how much of it is illegal? We don't know. We don't know. Because front businesses essentially will be putting money into the system to launder it. And to some extent, that's going to be potentially part of the GDP calculation. Because they themselves, they're going to put it through a business, then put it in a bank, right? To say this is, the source of the money is from business X. And all that's going to be recorded, because they're going to, one would imagine that they would have fraudulent account books, but accounts nevertheless to try to cover up the source of the funds. They'll have to have some kind of paper trail, if only to prevent a cursory examination, a surface level investigation, right? You don't make it too easy. Not that I want to encourage criminal efficiency and activity. So therein lies the rub. With regards to this, what is it that caused Dr. Figueroa to make such a strong statement? Because usually it's one of two things. Either the speaker is really going off the rails and is completely wrong, or there's something there. And maybe they're just wrong in how they're interpreting it, or wrong with how they're presenting it. but they're not necessarily wrong with the concern of an issue and how important they think the issue is, which is why they're willing to make strong statements, regardless of how accurate the framing and the context and the description and the details are. Just want to go back well, not go back, but move to a next story. With regard to the Port of Spain, before I could report, I think there was a story yesterday that there will continue disruptions, and now things are back on track, I guess you could say. The port has continued with or has resumed full operation, and this is after there were a decision to redirect cargo vessels to the Port of Point Lisas. Now the thing is, the concerns were disruptions to Port of Spain were causing cargo vessels to basically bypass Trinidad. The implications in the medium to long term of that for the Christmas season and for businesses would have been probably horrendous. One of the things being said is, why are you disrupting operations while protesting? And I spoke about this with regards to TNTech as well, and I appreciated the union with regards to the TNTech protest that they didn't take industrial action. But then on a certain level, I could understand unions. Let's not go to what they're demanding, because I'm not entirely sure what it is the port workers are demanding. They do say they have safety concerns and working condition concerns, all right, but they haven't given us any details yet. So at some point they should, if they want us to give them the support. They can't just give us generalizations and say support us. But I could see the union's point of view in the sense of, well, if we just protest on our time and our dime and the business is not affected, will management take us seriously? Now, maybe the port worker said, we'll give you a little threat, we'll give you a little preview of what could happen, but we're not actually going to commit to it unless we absolutely have to. And I could appreciate that. That is the ebb and flow of industrial relations and strategy. And, you know, you don't necessarily want to take a hard line approach and to force anyone's hand prematurely and unnecessarily, because you never know how they'll react. They might just close down Petrotrin, for better or worse. So we should continue as a population. One of the things I think that we don't always think about, it's not just about foreign exchange, but also as a twin island nation. Tobago knows this, I think, a lot better than us, because they go through this on a more day-to-day basis whenever the cargo ferry goes down. But at the end of the day, yes, most trade is conducted by sea, but we don't have any other alternative except a couple of ports. Even America, which does a lot of trade via sea, right? They only do so much trade between Canada and Mexico. A lot, but still, a lot of their trade is Southeast Asia. They have a lot of ports. They have a lot of ports. We don't have that many. So the disruption of one, we're gonna feel it a lot. And when I heard, I didn't even understand how that is possible. We pay for goods, the board is supposed to bring the goods, but they decide, nah, we're not going through the wait because we have a schedule. And while I understand the practical aspects of that for the boats, for the cargo ships, to some extent I'm like, so we're just not gonna get our stuff that our people paid for? And if that actually came to pass for any significant length of time, I wouldn't even want to know how that. One of the issues with trade issues is the fact that there's a backlog of ships on the west coast, on the western ports of America. It's a big mess to try to unravel now. Apparently it's not easy because it's been going on for 3 to 4 years. I hope we don't end up in a situation like that where all of a sudden we have a whole set of backlog stuff and no real way to clear it quickly. So this is something that we should be aware of. We import our food, not just our consumer products like clothes and electronics. So this is important for our very survival. But it is what it is. Let's take a break. When we come back, we will welcome my colleagues. Stay tuned.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
I'm back here and talk about a WSN show. Michael Small here. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I technically did not do so before. And allow me to introduce my co-host, my colleague, my good friend, Mr. Keaton Shaw.
Hello, Sean. How are you doing?
I am actually still pleasantly surprised by how the election or the voters of the American election made their decision, right? It's not about the result, but it's how, at least in some aspects. In other aspects, I'm just curious about it and I find interesting on an academic level.
I just like to add a disclaimer that the color of the shirt that I'm wearing this morning does not indicate anything. It was purely coincidental. And the color of Sean's shirt as well does not indicate it. This is purely coincidental, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to make that clear from the very onset.
Well, I don't know. Actually, it's funny you said that because I saw a video of Joe Biden's wife. I can't remember her first names.
Jill.
So apologies. Jill, right? Yeah, Joe's wife. Yeah, for some reason I thought it was wrong, but anyway.
You refer to it as the outgoing first lady, you know.
Yes, but I don't know if this is true or not. It could have just been internet foolery, or utilizing an old photo. But there was one video article that suggested that she came out of her voting booth, right, voting on the election, wearing a red suit. So some people think Joe Biden actually is enjoying the moment in the sense of you kicked me to the curb. You see, and there is this theory that, look, we'll never truly know. We probably all think that he would have lost, but technically speaking, he didn't actually lose, so he could always say for the rest of his life, I could have won, I beat him before, I could have won. See, y'all kicked me out and picked somebody else, But I am the only man who has defeated Trump. So
let's go back to how this conversation started. And you said that you were very surprised, not necessarily at the outcome, but rather how Americans voted, or their decision making in the voting process. Expand on that.
Well, first of all, and I think this is very important, as a nation where we have racial division in our politics, America had racial division in their politics, particularly after Obama's presidency. And ironically, liberal/Democrat or traditional Democrat supporters, or at least one of them, are pointing to the Democratic primary between Hillary and Bernie Sanders and that contest as one of the origin points of the American tribal racial politics. This is not like what Obama did, but what it turned into. And I think racial politics in our country is very much kind of baked into the system. It's a kind of a norm that, and at the level that societies usually have a difficulty getting away from these kinds of things once they get ingrained. It's not about good or evil. It's just it's the momentum or the habit or the norm is this, and to change it, no matter how bad or good it is not going to be done overnight. And
I'll just bear in mind, Bernie Sanders is independent, so bear that in mind as well.
Yeah. But I mean, he did go into the primaries and
he caucuses with the Democrats.
Yeah, a lot of Trump supporters now apparently are former Bernie supporters. The most famous one being Joe Rogan, who wanted to have a conversation with both candidates and only managed to have a conversation with one. He has gone on the record multiple times saying he's a Bernie Sanders guy, right? The thing is, the demographics of the election basically allude to the fact that Americans looked at race less. Race mattered less to them in this election.
And I'm glad that you raised that point, because one of the bigger talking points on election night were the Latino vote, which shifted to Donald Trump. And I think that's a very important point. Now, in respect to the outcome of this particular election, me personally, I was not at all surprised. I don't know why the general consensus, it seems, from what I've read on social media, and I'm speaking about locally what I've seen. There were those who were suggesting that this is, it has to do with race again. It has to do with sexism again, because of course they didn't vote for Kamala Harris because she's a multi-ethnic woman. And I kept thinking to myself, I think that is just a very poor excuse at this point to make. I'm not saying that racism or discrimination does not exist in the States. I'm not saying that sexism does not exist. But I'm simply saying that following the entire campaign, and even prior to the campaign, following the presidency of Joe Biden, and the vice presidency of Kamala Harris. I rarely did I hear from Kamala Harris before her endorsement from Joe Biden. Rarely. She was, to me, one of the most silent vice presidents that I can recall. Even Mike Pence was a lot more vocal and a lot more active as compared to Kamala Harris. In the case of Barack Obama, Joe Biden was a lot more active. Now, yes, he was, a lot younger as compared to now. In respect to Joe Biden as well, I think the Democrats really messed up. I think the party in itself seems to be in a mess. And we're speaking about American politics this morning because at the end of the day, American politics does impact upon Trinidad and Tobago in a geopolitical sense, and of course in an economic sense as well. So foreign policy is going to be interesting, though we could probably have an idea of what to expect given 2016 to 2020 Donald Trump presidency. But I was not at all surprised by the outcome. What was more surprising, rather, was just how much Donald Trump won by. Even the morning of the election, they were saying it's so close to call. because it could be a matter of 2 electoral college votes that really decide this outcome. It could be 268, 268. I think at one point they were saying it's Pennsylvania that is going to decide this election. Boy, Donald Trump just blew Kamala Harris out of the water, especially in those swing states.
Well, and that's the thing, not just the swing states. Pennsylvania, I believe that's Biden's, well, his hometown, Pennsylvania, is in Pennsylvania, Ohio. I think it's Pennsylvania. And then Tim Walz, his hometown. Like, one of the things that the election coverage was pointing out to the fact that even the home advantage for the Democrats didn't seem to matter. You know, places where you would have expected, look, the area that you're the governor of, the area that you grew up in, the area that gave you the initial support, one would think they would ride with you. And some of those areas, they just surprisingly did not. And then there's the famous video. I've seen multiple other commentators online react to it, coming out to CNN, where, and I'm not entirely sure how accurate this is, but this is CNN statistics. Kamala Harris essentially was not able in any county to outperform Joe Biden. And a lot of the coverage that NBC was giving that night was where she was underperforming over and over and over again. There were some areas where she met expectations to the same support that Biden got, but there were other areas where she was underperforming. And then now, one of the other things, remember Bush's election against Al Gore and how Florida was this big thing where you know, there were a lot of questions with regards to the results coming out of Florida, how long it took, how close it was. Florida decided that first election of Bush Jr.'s presidency. Well, there are apparently now some analysts are pointing to the fact that there are trends with regards to certain areas like Florida from 2016 to now that are getting further and further Republican. And demographically, people want to say it's about race, some people, but there are statistical indicators to say that minority voters were moving since 2016, maybe, I'm not sure if before, and it was a consistent trend that continued now. And people want to say Trump is a racist, but I guess the irony is more and more minorities are saying that doesn't, whatever you're saying, we don't believe, or it doesn't matter to us, because they're voting for him. As well as the gender issue, because one of the things is, and we even have it in our local papers this morning, America's not ready for a female president. What most people always seem to forget when they want to bring up gender and things like this, half of the voters, in theory, are women. And I actually think Trump, I believe, did well with suburban housewives, not just with men. Yes, it is African-American men, Latin American men, and the first-time voter, young males, college-age males. But I believe suburban housewives also said, hey, it's not about gender for us. Just like it's not about race for Latin American voters who voted more for Trump. It's about what is the policies. And I think this is something that we need to learn as well. The American voters said, we have an issue with how the economy is going. So the incumbent, why are we going to necessarily favor her? And I think that it's a lesson locally that it should be obvious. But we have economic issues too. And Kamala Harris didn't really do a good job saying why vote for her, how she will improve things. And I'm wondering if the PNM in a similar situation where it's not impossible for them to say, we could improve things, don't give up on us. But I don't think they've started. They still have a year to go. I don't think they've done a good enough job, and they should start sooner rather than later to say, hey, we could fix it. I'm not too sure if we lost my colleague, Mr. Shah, there in the meantime. So I'll continue on as we wait for Mr. Shah. Well, okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll check up on Keaton, and hopefully we'll have him back for the conversation. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WES and Shaw Michael Small. Hopefully with Mr. Shah. We'll be right back after this.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe in different criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
And we're back on talking about WSN. We have gotten back Mr. Shah and Keaton. Technical connectivity issues aside, he's gonna still fight up with us for the rest of the segment. Might not stay for calls, but when you disconnected, I was saying, I don't think demographics really was a factor. I think it was the sense of people went beyond that. They didn't bother with that. They worried about, you're the incumbent. You're not telling us anything to say how things will be different. In fact, on The View, Kamala Harris said she wouldn't do anything differently during the compared to what Biden's policy decision was. And people have concerns with the economy and immigration, and they wanted someone to do something about it, so they voted out. And I think we are primed for a similar scenario. At the very least, if the PNM doesn't kind of give the country something, at the risk of making promises they can't keep. They're the incumbent, so there will be a bias against them with regards to, you caused this mess, we need someone to fix it, so we'll vote you out too. And we know in TNT, our voter population is more than willing to vote people out.
Well, hopefully I've heard everything that you have to say, and do forgive me, my connection is rather poor at this time. But in the just to respond to what you're saying about the United States, following the presidential debate, the only one that took place in which afterwards people were reporting Kamala Harris baited Trump, he fell for it, she won that debate. I thought to myself, what are you reporting? I watched that debate. It was terrible from both sides. I had no idea of any policy direction. I had no clue of exactly what Kamala Harris's intentions were. She kept saying she had a plan. Mind you, Donald Trump said the same thing as well. We got no details as per anything at all. But you see, it was easier for Donald Trump to get away with it because here you have Kamala Harris making all these statements as the sitting vice president. And with what has happened over the last, come on, let's be real. Take a look at what is happening globally. I'm curious to see how Donald Trump treats with the Israel-Palestine conflict. I am curious to see how he treats with the Ukraine-Russian war, particularly in the fact that he has spoken about pulling funding from NATO or pulling out of NATO completely during his presidency between 2016 and 2020. I am looking at all that, even right here in the Caribbean. When Trump entered office in 2016, one of the very first things that he did was to, again, close off Cuba to the United States and basically, to a great extent, the rest of the world. And this is after Barack Obama reversed before he exited office. So, you know, I'm curious to see what happens there as well, because CARICOM countries are saying that we need to remove this embargo or this blockade on Cuba. So all of that comes into play. But I'm taking a look at the Middle East. I'm taking a look at the Russia-Ukraine, and I'm also taking a look at the future of the European Union, because you might think that Donald Trump doesn't have a role to play there. He certainly does have a level of influence at this particular time. In the context of Trinidad and Tobago, bringing it to what you said, of course, political parties clearly need to have a firm. They need to give a sense of direction as per their future and their intentions for a future Trinidad and Tobago. And it's really up to the voting public to take a deeper interest in what is happening in TNT and to try and...
Looks like Keaton just dropped again. He's joining back with us now.
What is going on this morning? I'm just really what's
we did hear most of what you had to say. It's just that you dropped suddenly, so you can pick up right where you left off.
I'm glad that you did. You know, as I said, what is really going on this morning? It seems as though we're not supposed to be speaking about politics, but probably about currency instead. I don't know. But you know, back to what I was saying about locally in respect to the political atmosphere. Yes, a lot of pressure is on the incumbent government, and it is often suggested that Trinbagonians do not vote someone into office, they vote someone out of government. But at the same time, what alternatives exist? I would agree that you have personalities that exist. You have a personality in Gary Griffith, for example, but I don't see NTA as an alternative because of not much to go in respect to political party or institution there. You have Michaela Pandey as a personality, nothing in respect to the Patriotic Front as a political organization or party. Hope, well, you have a couple of personalities that exist there, but honestly speaking, at this point in time, I don't know. I hope that there is hope in hope, or hope has hope within themselves, put it that way. But even the main opposition party, the United National Congress, they need to get their act together. So of course pressure is on the People's National Movement. But if political personalities or the existing opposition institutions remain as they are right now, it eases to a certain degree the pressure on the incumbent PNL government. And that, by the way, we're just adding that into context based off of what you were seeing previously. And I hope that I heard everything you said previously and made sense of it in my response.
Well, you know, I, like you, thought the opposition was not looking good for the last couple of years. In fact, I find the opposition similar to the Republican Party in opposition during the Biden presidency. They just weren't good enough, the messaging, the strategy. But the thing is, more and more I'm thinking that there's a greater and greater possibility and likelihood that Trinidad and Tobago will vote the PNM out, right? It's not about if the UNC is good or not. At the end of the day, the allure will simply be the UNC is not the PNM, and at the very least, let's not repeat what we have if we think it's that bad. So I'm starting to wonder the UNC might not even need to fix its problems. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I would have preferred the UNC to win because they're strong. But it could be, even if the UNC is weak, they might win depending on how bad the country perceives the PNM's performance, particularly last 3 years, to be. And this foreign exchange issue, I think, might just be the cherry on top of the whole economy conversation.
Well, Sean, let's put it this way. The United National Congress, as the main opposition party, has an ideal opportunity to try and reinvent itself going forward. Because if you take a look at the People's National Movement and the United National Congress, and just bear in mind, Lassen Barth, who has now seemed to have opened his arms to the United National Congress once more, and they too, I'm not entirely sure of the extent, but have opened his arms, and just a couple days prior to him rejoining the party, he never left as a member, but he was not active. He said that people view the PNM and the UNC as being two sides of the same coin. Now, he's gone against that since, because he believes that the primary objective is to get the People's National Movement incumbent out of government. But I raised that point and I raised that statement because if you're saying that the United National Congress has a better chance because people are fed up with the PNM and they vote them out, the question that you have to ask yourself, is the United National Congress an alternative, or is it just an exchange? Are we exchanging, different names, different colors, but political ideology? I don't know it. I don't fully comprehend what is the political ideology of each party, but it seems as though, let's just say whatever we want to say to gain popular opinion. Is it an alternative or is it an exchange? So yes, I have not had a lot of faith or confidence in either the People's National Movement or the United National Congress over at least the last 5 years. But the point is, the United National Congress finds themselves in a position where it is an ideal opportunity to reinvent itself. It's an ideal opportunity to speak about this is the future of the party, because the future of the PNM right now, internally, they're trying to work that out. When they do, we'll learn more about it. But every step that the People's National Movement incumbent make, the United National Congress has an opportunity to take a better step, a better direction, if they wanted to. But at the end of the day, as I said, it's really up to the voting population to force these things to happen. It's really up to the voting population to demand different, if they want different.
Can the UNC reinvent itself with the leadership remaining the way it is? That might mean Kamala, that might mean others in the executive, not all of them or all of them. Can it reinvent itself with the current leadership?
No, it has reinventing itself speaks to revision of the executive of the party as well. You see, the thing is, the executive of the party at the end of the day end up being the individuals who lead an election campaign. If the executive was separate to those who are fighting the election campaign, but yes, you can probably have something like that taking place. But the political leader in Kamala Persad-Bissessar, though I think she has been very weak at times, can remain. But in order to reinvent yourself, you need to change the individuals around you. Quite possibly, this is something that they should be looking at. Changing the individuals around you, giving a different alternative, and then quite possibly speaking about a succession plan. But if you take a look, just as how people are debating within, outside of the People's National Movement, and internally as well, who is the next individual to lead the People's National Movement? And there have been some names that have been called. Nobody has asked the question, who is the next person to lead the United National Congress? So
Well, technically we did a while ago, but not recently.
And you've got to change those individuals as well. You've got to give some fresh perspective, because as members of the opposition, to me, I don't think that they've done justice as being a party in opposition. I'm not saying every single individual has been performing poorly. I'm just saying that, again, it's easy to make a statement and it's easy to oppose, but I would like to have an alternative rather than an exchange. So, again, it's the opportunity exists. It's whether or not that opportunity is taken, and quite frankly, it's whether or not the people of Trinidad and Tobago, are they expecting different, or is it that they've gotten so fed up and frustrated, we just don't care at this point?
Well, here's another thought. Because when the UNC had to transition from Basil Pandey to Kamala Persad-Bissessar, it didn't go that smoothly. Now, we know that the PNM, some of their dirty laundry is being aired in public with regards potentially to, we believe it's with regards to succession. Dare I ask, if the UNC had to go through this, it might even be messier than what we see coming from the People's National Movement right now?
Could you just repeat that question, please? I missed the last bit of it.
The issue, I think we both suspect that the UNC might have problems with their succession planning as well. There's no clear, obvious choice. And I'm wondering that they might end up in a messier public situation than the PNM because they don't necessarily have all of the discipline and structure and traditions, and history of the PNM. Not that it's necessarily, serving them well right now. But the UNC already had a situation between when they had to go from Pandey to Persad-Bissessar. Although you could say Manning to Rowley was no smooth sailing either. But I'm wondering, would the UNC succession, the actual now having to pick the next political leader after Kamala, whenever she retires, might that be quite a messy situation that they will get themselves into?
Well, it honestly depends. Am I going to learn from what has transpired in the past? Am I going to learn from the response that I've seen from the public when it comes to internal party affairs or internal party matters being leading to public spats? So the transition could be messy. It very much could be messy if we see anything that happened in the last internal executive elections in the United National Congress happening again, or even currently what is happening in the People's National Movement if that happens. But the opportunity exists for a better public relations campaign and a better united front. You do not want to have these public spats, and you do not want to have this infighting, because you're going against your name, United National Congress, in any way if you're doing that. I don't think it is going to be any easier, and I don't think it's going to be any more difficult. It's really up to the party heads.
Lost my colleague, Mr. Shah, again. One of the things that I wanted to ask him, so I'll present this to you, the viewers. Hopefully he will rejoin us. Actually, he's rejoining us right now, but I am going to make a reference with regards to the American succession. Keaton, while you're here, I wanted to ask you something. I think the American election, one of the things that some Harris supporters who are a bit willing to be objective, they actually don't necessarily blame Harris, but the scenario by which she became the nominee. And I'll get to why I bring this up after, but the setup is Biden was supposed to be transitional, but then at the age of 81, he wanted to go up for re-election again until a horrendous debate performance, and he was asked to step down, and it took 3 weeks for him to step down. Harris joined the whole election campaign somewhat late, and one would question, was this transition not, because it was not planned out, because it wasn't managed well, it kind of set her behind the ball. And I'm wondering if this is a lesson that our two or more parties should look at with regards to, you need to not put your party in a position where it's scrambling to transition and it's doing it in a very clunky, inelegant, and messy way, because that might have cost the Democrats this election. And I do wonder if now what's going on with Stuart Young and the potential of him being the successor and Dr. Rowley retiring, if that might actually, in hindsight, when we look at it, when the dust settles, might be a major factor in the PNM having a difficult time with this upcoming general election.
All right, Sean, whilst my internet provider permits me to continue this conversation, I mean, I did not hear your question in its entirety, so hopefully my response aligns with what I did hear on your part. Very simply put it, the Democrats waited until it was too late, and by the time that Biden decided he's not running anymore, which his hand was forced, it was very difficult to try now choose an individual whom they saw as a strong enough candidate. So you can't do that. And secondly, try your best not to anoint a new leader. Don't anoint a leader as per se. Simple reason being is that people are going to find it very frustrating in the sense that a political leader anointing their future leader doesn't seem very democratic, does it? But again, internal party matters are to be sorted out. And just like the Democrats in the United States, who really have a lot to work on, they have 4 years to bounce back from it, because right now the Senate is in favor of the Republicans. The House is yet to be decided, but if it goes in favor of the Republicans, the only opportunity that exists for the part of the Democrats is to try and clean up their party and try and make sure that they come back stronger than ever for a 2028 election. But as it relates to down here, I don't think anointing a political leader is something that could be seen as favorable, because it kind of stymies the democratic process, that is. So again, I hope my response aligns, because I'm responding to what I did hear.
You actually brought up something I didn't necessarily refer to directly, the fact that Kamala was not elected as candidate, but essentially appointed. And that's a very good point. And it goes back to the heart of some people's issues with Stuart Young's situation. But you did mention that the Republicans won the Senate and the House. Do you have any concerns that this might make Donald Trump more aggressive in his policies? I do think that might actually be good for the conflict in the Middle East, because you need someone with a strong hand to separate those two sides, and maybe he would do it despite him having support for Israel. But outside of that, I'm not too sure. His aggression might be a risky thing, you know, depending on how far he goes.
You know, funny enough, interestingly, the individual, I am not really concerned. Again, very quickly, because I'm not really concerned about Donald Trump as per se. You know, you have an idea of what to expect from him because of 2016 to 2020. I am more so interested and paying very close attention to the vice presidency of J.D. Vance, because I think that Republicans could probably quicker get through to J.D. Vance, and party groups could quicker get through to J.D. Vance. I'm more curious to see J.D. Vance as vice president, because I have an idea of what to expect from Donald Trump. But I'm still waiting to see what J.D. Vance brings to the table.
Trump only has one term, and then the Democrats don't have to worry about Trump anymore. J.D. Vance is assumed to be the potential next nominee of the Republican Party. So I guess that would actually add a lot of weight to what you said. I've already heard somebody basically point to Vance might be 2028, the Republican candidate, potentially.
Well, sure, Michael Small, honestly, I didn't hear anything on your part, so forgive me. But I honestly, I am so frustrated because not everything is always supposed to run smooth, and there's no clause in the contract saying I could expect 100% service. But come on, I pay for a very good internet package, and this is what's going on. To the viewing audience, I do apologize. I know this is very frustrating, and I know it may seem quite unprofessional, but this is probably one of the faults that we have to examine when it comes to remote work or a work from home environment, or even going cashless when you have to use your phone and an internet connection to do transactions. But you know what? Listen, that's another kind of word that we can open up another. I think with how my internet connection is this morning, respectfully, Sean, I will ask to be excused because, yeah.
Well, folks, you know, digitization, it's something that may or may not be
but
a unicorn.
I didn't permit to stay longer, but I would be viewing of talking points. I may not be able to participate, but I will still be viewing it.
Well, thank you for joining me, Keaton. It's a shame. It's a shame, but good job trying to keep up with the conversation despite not being able to hear about probably half of it. Folks, that said, yes, let's not go into digitization and cashless. That's a whole next set of kettle of fish that needs to be resolved. Unfortunately, not sooner, but hopefully. With that said, we'll take a break. When we come back, we will open the phone lines and you can have your say. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WESN. We'll be right back after this.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to Insta. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
And we're back here and talking about the WESN show. Michael Small here. Mr. Shah had to leave us, unfortunately. His internet connection, probably something local to his area, was affecting his connectivity, particularly his download, even though it seemed as though most of the time he was coming through clear, at least for me, and I assume for the audience out there, he had a problem actually being able to follow the conversation without disruption there. It was not, our signal was not going clear back to him. Now, with that said, we have our phone lines to open so that you can have your say, and our first caller is already on the line with me this morning. Diego Martin, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Small. And I heard...
Hello?
Yeah, you hear me?
Not getting any audio.
Hello?
All right, now I'm hearing something. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Right, and good morning to Mr. Shah, wherever you go. Let us not make excuses for poor connectivity and poor line service. We know that I have always had problems. Now, you know where that linking to? That linking to the TTPS, you know. The TTPS, when there's a problem, call them. How are you going to call them when you have no connectivity, neither phone line, internet, or? So you can't contact them, and most of the phone lines, the phones in the police service, nobody answers. But what I want to talk about something serious, and I'm going to say it bluntly. The current PNM policies facilitating the brain drain. I was fortunate to see some debates in South, I think it was sponsored by Dr. Monilal, and I've privy to see a forum at Hillview College where you had three brilliant ladies, Michaela Pandey, Dr. Sachuan, Dr. Atz, and you had the MP for Sawa in a discussion. And during the discussion, these young, bright people, I think it's a sixth form discussion basically for a number of schools in the area. And what they were saying, a lot of these people on Cape, when they asked them where and why they want to leave the country, two things came up: crime and job opportunities. And when they asked them again if they want to come back, they say no because of those two issues. If they come back, they're vulnerable. If they come back, they can't get a job. That also, what they were saying, put added pressure for the parents, because the parents go be under stress how these young people are going to live abroad by themselves. And that is a policy I don't believe the government understand. They're facilitating. The additional problem is when you send your, other than you're winning an open scholarship to get foreign exchange to basically pay your school fees. When these people go abroad, where are they getting the foreign exchange to pay for the school? That is another burden they have. And they do it basically to give their kids, the very bright ones, a chance to survive. And if our current Prime Minister and the Minister of Education doesn't see that, I think they should go back and listen to those bright students, listen to how they debate, because I am sure they could debate some of those ministers and tell them what the policies is. Eric Williams said the future of our country in the bag of school children, and if you're not doing that to help keep your brain power back in Trinidad, we are not progressing. The other quick thing I want to talk to, two issues that we could get some confidence in the police service. You see that policeman that was shot? I want to know what insurance. Remember the PP government, I did some legislation towards $1 million if they're on duty. I want to know what the current head of the leadership of the police, and by extension the TTP, the second division officer, what they're doing. Because the first set know how to negotiate, because they negotiated during the day of policing, and they ended up there. So it's sad that a policeman on duty has been shot, and his family is left to wonder how they're going to survive. And I think the head of it is Mr. Dixon, inspected, he has to come out and tell us where that negotiation with that. And the second thing is the ACP Wayne Meister give me some confidence when he say that incident, it should have been caught on body cameras. So I'm expecting the police to do a proper, quick investigation. Tell us the honest truth, how a civilian was shot, how a policeman was shot, why this policeman was wearing gears and going into the dark in the night. Come out and tell us quickly what's going on. So those are two little issues that we could start trust the police. I'll go and have a nice morning.
All right, Kola, thank you. I myself actually had some weird connectivities with you yesterday and today. I'm assuming that some of what you said went out clearly enough. You brought up a very good point, though. I was able to follow most of what you said. One of the things is the brain drain issue. And to what extent is it the responsibility of the current administration? That's not something that we could assume one way or the other. The reason why I say that is, yes, the current conditions might not be helping the situation. I think that's a fair assumption to make. But I do think that there's something to be said about a small island nation. It's similar to a small town of a big country where people naturally will leave for better opportunities. There will always be industries and jobs that will never be available in TNT because we're not big enough. Essentially, for Americans, if they want to do certain jobs, they have to go across the country because it's not even on, some jobs will not be available on the East Coast. They would have to go to the West Coast. They won't be available in the Midwest. And look how big they are. I'm talking about a third of the country might not have a job opportunity for some people that they're looking for. They would have to migrate across a large landmass. That's why certain things will never be available here in TNT. We're too small. So we'll always have that issue. The benefits are sun, sand, and sea, great environment to live in, to retire in. There are a lot of advantages of living here, but there are also disadvantages of living here. And because of that, the brain drain, some amount of it will always be there. So the question is, what degree? Is it the natural occurrence, and what degree is it the government? We have Maraval on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on air.
Hi, good morning. The police just got shot, right? He was on plainclothes. But the thing with these people, they were sleeping, and they burst open the door. Men coming in your house with police clothes. So the man must think, oh, okay, they come to rob me, they come to do something for my family. So I don't know what happened, how he had a gun. If he had a gun, they say he shoot back at them, and they kill him, and the police get shooting in the process. What the police is, any police and them supposed to be in uniform. I understand he was out of uniform, you know. So what's going on in Trinidad now? People afraid. If you say even if you say police, afraid people, because the thinking is not police that's coming in your house, right? And you just break open the door. I saw the father crying last night on the TV and say, this thing is what's going on in Trinidad is stupidness because you enter in my house and I don't know what's going on. And if I shoot you, I take up something, I hit you and you dead. Consequences for me, I end up going in jail until they could find really what take place, you know. And the next thing with the politicians and the Karma, I find Karma should do like Rowley and phase out. So they get somebody else younger because you don't tell me it don't have one person there that could take over for. It have an Indian girl she's a lawyer. I can't remember her name right now, but I find she's very good. Then you have Naked, then you have Munilal, you have all these young ones coming up. Give one a chance. If they don't win election now, at least they're going through the process that, you know, they could come out win the next 5 years or thing. Just put things in place. But if you keep there like a grandmother with your stick walking, how you expect the process to take place? So it have younger people coming in. See, the younger ones don't care about who is Indian, who is black, who is white, who is Chinese. They have the process, and they have become, Mommy, my children say, Mommy, I'm not voting for who because they is my hair or my color. I voted for them. I voted for people that could do something for me. You know, because my two sons doing all kind of things just to help themselves right now. Because one have a contract with the government. He's after 2-3 years, he out. So he doing all kind of different things to see after that he will get something to do for himself. The next one doing some kind of finance business, and he said, "Mommy, I can't stay here. I will leave. I will have to leave and go somewhere to get an education, you know, or to get a job outside."
I'll have to ask you to end it there. I'm sorry, but we do have
thank you
another
about that.
waiting.
Sorry about that. Sorry about
Thank
that.
you. No, it's quite all right. What happens, folks, if we don't have a caller waiting, we might extend the time. But when we do have a caller waiting, we do have to limit it. I'm sorry, it might always not seem that everybody gets the same amount of time, but it just is what it is. I'll respond after at least to one of your points. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller. You on air?
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Yes. You spoke this morning about the issues of with the SWWTU and the Port Authority, and you made some interesting comments. So let me try to clarify some of those things for you. We have two cargo ports in the country: the Point Lisas, Plibdeco, and Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Right? One in Port of Spain, one in Point Lisas. The fundamental difference in the two ports is that Point Lisas is run as a business and Port of Spain Port is run as a state enterprise. And that is the fundamental difference in the two. For all the years you've been hearing issues with port issues, Sean, how many of those port issues have been Point Lisas? Not much. Over all the years, there's a fundamental problem in Port of Spain with the attitude of the workers, the attitude of the union. The best time the Port Authority of Port of Spain, Port had when Colin Lucas was there. Because he was a man on the ground. So one of the issues that is management. I believe that they need to privatize the operations of the port. Not necessarily the ownership, but privatize the operations of the port to get them to bring them to him. Mr. Anisette, just previous to him when Mr. Townsend was there, they have done the same thing. They have done the same thing, and thank God there's another port that they can divert the cargo to that operates as a business. Let me say this, and you mentioned something that you didn't understand, why it is that the ships would bypass the Port of Spain port. Let me say this. Port of Spain, the two ports in Trinidad are not ports of final destination. They are en route ports. For instance, in Port of Kingston, when there are vessels that leave in New Orleans or they leave in Miami, they come with cargo to transship. So they come directly to that port and they offload. A lot of them completely offload because that is a port of final destination. Then things are transhipped from there. We are just en route. We don't have the capacity to take on enough cargo for our island, not big enough to take on enough cargo for one vessel to come and just offload in Trinidad. Hence the reason why, if it is that, and let me tell you what happens, if it is that a ship their route is their time is disrupted, if they come to Trinidad and there's a strike on the port, and all they do, Sean, they go to an export and they offload our cargo. They have the authority to do that when you sign the contract. They offload the cargo there. They could offload some in Grenada. They might offload some if they have space in St. Lucia. And they go about their business. And then that now becomes second priority for them. There's no longer first priority. And the issue is Port of Spain Port has always run like this. They have always been the disruptor in the system. And as I said, what we need is to change the management of the port. The port needs to be run as a business and not as a state enterprise, because that is what it is. It is a state enterprise, and it is run as a state enterprise. And until they understand that Point Lisas model is the model, we will continue to have problems in Port of Spain. You know, when people have diverted the cargo over the years the cargo to come to Point Lisas rather than Port of Spain, it's because of that Port of Spain. Point Lisas is successful because of Port of Spain. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. Yeah, you answered a question there. What I was really confused about, and thank you for this, what's the fate of our goods when they bypass our ports and assumingly don't go to Point Lisas? Because I get the perspective of the ship having to be on schedule, but I was just really like at a loss as to what does that mean for our goods. So it's good that you answer that. It doesn't mean anything good. It's a big inconvenience for our businesses and therefore our economy. One of the things people need to understand, yes, I know it's very easy to vilify businessmen, particularly the big conglomerates and all the only for profit. Well, technically speaking, a lot of small businesses are only for profit too, right? Because they have to survive. We have seen businesses fail because of COVID and before. And at the end of the day, also, that's what makes up our economy. We kind of want our economy to do well, so we need businesses to do well. We want them to act ethically, but to some extent, they do have to go after profit, or at the very least, in this case, basic revenue. We need goods to sell. The thing is, the irony, Mr. San Fernando, is we had Michael Anisette on a while ago, maybe the first year of Talking Point, and this came up. And he himself, I believe, pointed to Point Lisas. But he did so as an example, maybe. I think he was trying to make the point of turning Port of Spain into a public-private partnership, but to make the operations more efficient with some amount of private influence, right? But he was also hesitant not to go too far with his commentary and to go too far with what he was proposing, because one of the issues is when an enterprise is operated, when a state enterprise is operated, they will also consider social things, social considerations. This one need a job. Well, we can't fire people. We need to give them raises or what have you. So the whole thing about bloat in state entities is part of that. It's part of that social dimension. We need to do things for the people. We're not just a private company. We're a government company. So we're not about profit. We're about helping the people. Well, the problem is then, depending on how you do that, operations suffer. And the point of an entity to exist is to do whatever its operations are supposed to be. So I asked Mr. Anisette up front, would you condone maybe bringing back the staffing levels down to something reasonable? Because he himself admitted that the port did that, and then the politicians just filled it right back up with redundant workers. But as a union leader, he can't then commit to say, yes, we should cut the fat, trim the fat. He couldn't say that. And it makes me wonder, to what extent is the union really willing as an entity to give consideration to stakeholders? Look, we're only going to have a job if we are valued. If we are not valued, we run the risk of no longer having a job. To some extent, that happened to Petrogen. To some extent, we could debate on the refinery being open and closed, but the entity being broken up and having to go through a restructuring process, to some extent it happened because Petrogen as it existed was not seen as valuable enough, similar to BWIA. And I agree with you, it needs to be run as a business, not necessarily ownership has to change to private, but it needs to be run like a business to be efficient. Short follow-up by San Fernando coming in. Welcome back, Mr. San Fernando.
What I forgot to tell you is that the Point Lisas port workers are represented by the same SWWTU as the Port of Spain workers. Yeah? So that's tell you is management, because they are represented by the same union. So I just wanted to throw that in the mix.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I will not doubt that. I would not doubt that at all. That's why I said Mr. Anisette, of course, couldn't commit to certain things when he was giving his presentation. How do you take a state entity and make it run more like a business while still having government ownership and not getting that government interference? To do that consistently, because we really need that across all state entities. To do it in one port, all right. To do it in multiple ports, to do it in multiple entities, that's the trick. Because I guess, and it comes back down to what Mr. Savannah said, you need not just the government to say we're going to do it, but any people who actually have to do the day-to-day work to buy into it, to enforce it, to ensure it. And that comes down to, yes, the workers and the union to some degree, but management, because they are the leadership on the ground in that situation. A couple of quick things. One, with regards to, and I may speak about this more, but the call from Marval brought it up. We need to ask the TTPS, what are the procedures for entering a house to serve a warrant? Because if you follow what goes on in the States in any degree, you would know that no-knock warrants, how they serve warrants in the States, when they declare police, no-knock warrants is when they don't declare themselves, or they just barge in because they want to take the people by surprise. All of these things were up for debate at one point in time and might come up for debate again. We haven't necessarily gone through and asked about those details, right? And maybe this case will bring about those details. Did the plainclothes officer have a body camera on himself? Or what would the body, because if he doesn't, then we have to question that the body camera footage will reveal what actually happened with regards to him and how he interacted with the situation. There are a lot of questions here because I don't know if the police gets the benefit of the doubt anymore. More on that maybe tomorrow. And then now, I think, yeah, there's also that question about what about funds for people who die in the line of duty, for their families, or wounded in the line of duty? What can we do? What can't we do? I mean, right now in the current economic climate, I don't know. And to close, yeah, connectivity is a big issue. We already, I think, have uncertainty with regards to police response times. We don't want to add connectivity to compound the problem. But if we really want to deal with crime fighting, this isn't technically, the caller made a point-and-cheek contribution on connectivity, but I think response times, though, especially for home invasions, and the potential of all this fake police stuff. If we want to combat fake police, we need faster police response times, because that's what prevents people from masquerading as cops. Because if you're a fake police, you're wearing the very thing that allows you to commit the crime, is also a very, very beautifully obvious arrow. I am the one that is the suspect here. I'm not wearing some orange shirt and blue jeans and I could just hide in the crowd. I'm not wearing all black where I could just duck down into the shadows. I'm wearing a police uniform. Yes, depending on the tactical way, it might be dark, but it's obvious if I'm in the line of sight of police and they're trying to find someone masquerading as police, that's the guy. But they need to respond quick enough to have that advantage. With that said, Mr. Shah is not here to say it. He would have been, but he's not, so I'll say it for him. Make today a good day, as he would always say. Remember your allegiance to the Republic. This is talking about a WESN. Stay safe, be vigilant, and we will see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.